Say it ain't so, KO. Have y'all heard the story of Paul, Bernardo, and Karla Homolka, who were nicknamed the Ken and Barbie KILLERS because they went on a killing spree up in Canada back in the 90s? Come on, y'all got to hear this. So I watched this documentary on Discovery Plus, but I believe it's on the ID channel. This is Paul, Bernardo, and Karla Homolka. Yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so boom, just a little back history on Paul and Karla. Paul was 23, Karla was 17. Yes, 17. They met when Karla was in Scarborough, Canada for a convention, and she went downstairs to a bar, wound up meeting Paul there. 20 minutes later, they was in his hotel room knocking the boots, you hear me? A little hot and ready like Little Caesars. Anyway, so even despite him living an hour and a half away, they developed a relationship, all that good stuff. When he would come into town to see her, he would stay at her parents' house where she lived with her two little sisters and her parents. And of course, well, they say initially he wasn't allowed to sleep in her room, but after a couple of months, the parents built up trust. He was sleeping in the bed with her, which I found very strange. Because I don't care how cool we is, you're not sleeping in the room with my child, and then she's 17 and you 23. In my personal opinion, the parents was dead wrong for letting her have a relationship with that grown-ass man. And that's just what I say, and I stand on that. But continuing. So, yeah, they was cool. They wound up moving out, getting their own place together and all that good stuff. This is what stuff starts to get really weird. Paul wants to start taping everything, documenting their lives like a now would be considered a YouTube couple. This will be very important later on. So 2 years later, Karla went to the police in February 1993 to report Paul for domestic violence because he jacked her up, right? Not only was she trying to snitch on him for whooping her butt, she sat there and was like, oh, just so you know, he also SA'd and kidnapped these other girls that y'all been looking for in Canada, and he killed them. Oh, yeah, and by the way, he unalived my little sister, too, and I knew about that. Ma'am, how long have you known this? Because why you ain't been say something? Y'all, when I say my jaw dropped watching this entire documentary, I had to watch it several times to break down all the details for y'all and to put them in order for y'all. Before I get started, I want to say this story is very much trigger warning. It is very graphic. It is very serious. So please do not listen to it if you don't want to be triggered in some type of way. So back before Karla and Paul was even on their radar, back in May 1986, there were 2 rapes. Okay, 2 rapes in the Scarborough area. Then come December 1987, another rape happened, and that's when they was like, hold on, all 3 of these could be connected because all of them involved young women on transportation late at night with the same MO. Guy walks up to them with a knife, forces them in the bushes, rapes them, does all kind of crazy stuff to them. He even went as far as broke one lady's arm. So this is going off and on for a couple years. Like, this is really his MO. They started calling him the Scarborough rapist. So it was so messed up because nobody could really get a good look at him. But they would describe all of his attacks and everybody would be like, you know, he gagged me, he used a knife, he smeared me in the dirt. He even went so far as to make some of these women tell him that they loved him. And for some reason, he would take their license and threaten them. But of course, it makes sense to take their license because that's where their address is. So, you know, put it all together. So all in all, in about 3 years, there were 8 attacks. Nobody could really see his face until one day he switched up his MO. May 29th, 1990, he approached a woman in broad daylight after she got off the bus, then had a conversation with her, forced her into the bushes, raped her, but she got a good look at him. So she worked with the police sketch people and like came up with a sketch of him. Everybody was like, oh, he looks like the boy next door. But that's what all the victims said too. They were like, they really couldn't get a good look at him, but he looked at like a good looking young guy and they weren't initially alarmed by his presence. And I find it very ironic that later on down the line, they wind up realizing that Paul lived within steps of most of these sexual assaults that he did on these young girls late at night. Oh yeah, there were 13 assaults, sexual assaults altogether throughout his whole little serial thing going on for a couple years. So luckily, he was actually on the police's radar along with about 5 other gentlemen at that time as being possible suspects. So they questioned him, did their whole rundown. They said nothing about him triggered them. And he even willingly gave up his DNA to be tested for these sexual assaults. They let him go. You have to think about it. Back then in 1990, DNA was not as advanced as it is now, where they can get your DNA back in a couple weeks now. It took them 3 years. No, was it 3? It took them 2 years, 2 years after he gave his DNA for them to realize he was the Scarborough rapist. And me personally, just my own little side note, my own little tidbit, I personally feel like the only reason why they realized that he was a Scarborough rapist and went back and tested his DNA was because his wife had went to the police and said all of this, because ain't no way it took you 2 years. But they say that they only had one DNA like certified tester, and it was a whole big thing, so whatever. Okay, so fast forward to December 1990. I want y'all to realize that I'm telling you all of these dates so you can see how close together everything was and how he gradually got worse and worse over the years and nobody caught on to him. So it was Christmas Eve, 1990. Paul was at Karla's house with her parents and her little sisters celebrating Christmas. Of course, he was recording everything. Now, what we did not know is that Paul was having conversations with Karla saying, hey, I want to have sex with your sister. You need to make this happen. Don't y'all know Karla took her... I'm sorry, I had to compose myself. Karla took her punk, raggedy, dusty, crusty self to work, got some halothane, which is some type of poison to dogs and humans. Either way, drugged her sister. Let me add this. The night of Christmas Eve while they were there, Karla's parents said it was okay if her younger sister Tammy had some alcohol while she was partying with Paul and Karla. So everybody goes to sleep. Paul, Karla, Tammy are still downstairs. I don't exactly know the full events of what happened, but long story short, they told us that Karla took a rag and put some halothane on it and held it near Tammy's face so that she could inhale it and pass out, so that then Paul could proceed to rape her. Your own sister? Like, how can you let somebody do this to your flesh and blood? And not only that, you let him videotape all of this while you complicitly helped him sexually assault your sister repeatedly. And not only that, you got in on the act as well. Yes, you performed oral sex on your own sister while she was passed out and while your boyfriend was raping her. That is the sickest thing I've ever heard in my life. But it gets worse. So poor little Tammy, while all of this is happening to her while she's passed out, she winds up vomiting. And what do? They let her vomit, and the vomit stays stuck in her throat. She chokes and dies. They lied and just said, oh, we were watching TV and Tammy was laying down and all of a sudden she threw up and she was breathing funny and she died. It was later said that both of them were inconsolable at the funeral. Which, duh, because y'all killed that girl. People even said that Paul was worried. And why was he worried? Because he said he was the one that gave her the alcohol and he thought he was going to get in trouble. I call bullshit. Y'all were worried that they were going to figure out that y'all actually killed that girl. And not only that, y'all recorded it. Like, For your boyfriend to say he wants your little sister as a Christmas gift and for you to wrap her up in a bow and give it to him is sickening. I would like to add, while she was telling this story to the police, she conveniently did not mention that she had oral sex with her sister. And there's a lot of things that she would tell to the police that would make her look in a better light than what she really was. Karla's whole thing was, I'm going to tell you about all of this stuff that happened, and I'm going to tell you that there are tapes out there, but if you can't find the tapes, then you have to go with my story. Which made sense because the police knew that 2 girls had been abducted and murdered. They didn't know who did it. They knew there was a whole slew of sexual assaults by this serial rapist. They had no clue who he was. And here in comes his wife handing him up on a silver platter. What are you going to do? Yeah, they went with it. I was pissed about that, but we'll get to that later. So fast forward, June 14th, 1991, 14-year-old Leslie McHaffey gets kidnapped, right? Nobody really paid attention to it because they quote unquote called her a troubled teen. She was apparently having a lot of issues at home with her mother and just rebelling and wanting to stay out, right? So one night she goes out with her friend, stays out longer than she needs to. She comes home. Her mama locked the door and was like, nah, you can't get in type shit, right? So Leslie had called her friend back up and was like, yo, can I come over there? Her friend was like, hell no, you can't come over here. Like, I'm in the crib. I had to sneak back in myself, so no. So we don't know what events exactly transpired, but somehow Paul wound up convincing or kidnapping, but I'm pretty sure kidnapping, Leslie and putting her into the car and then taking him to his house. And that is where he proceeded to tie her up and keep her as a sex slave. The crazy thing about this was nobody really took her disappearance seriously. Like, nobody said she was missing. Everybody was just like, oh, she's with some guy. She's ran away, yada, yada, whoop, whoop. Whole time, shawty in there fighting her for her life with the Satan, the devil himself. And Satan's spawn, Karla. So what I found crazy was that, like, Paul went back to the house, tied shawty up, and just told Karla was like, yeah, I just want to let you know, like, I kidnapped this girl. We're going to keep her here for a while, but it's cool. You can go back to sleep. What? I was looking confused. Like, y'all was looking confused when NBA YoungBoy woke her up and was like, oh, bitch ass daddy. Like, what? So it later comes out that they kept Leslie for a while, but they wound up killing her Father's Day weekend because Karla's parents were coming over to their house and she was chained down in the basement. So, of course, you can't have this girl in the basement. She could possibly, you know what I'm saying, make noise, whatever, get you caught up. So they strangled her before the little Father's Day festivities that they actually recorded. They didn't record the unaliving of her. They didn't record her murder, but they did record them doing Father's Day, which was so weird to me. And it was so crazy because her mama even tried to go down to the basement and they had to stop her mama because her body was still down there. So fast forward like 2 weeks, right? On June 29th, 1991, 2 weeks after Leslie McHaffey went missing, and it also happened to be Paul and Karla's wedding day, Leslie's dismembered body was found encased in cement blocks at the bottom of Lake Gibson in Canada. A fisherman was out there on his canoe, just chilling, drinking beer, whatever, came across her foot, freaked out, called the police. They went down there, scuba diving, all that, found her whole body and everything. They wound up identifying her through the dental records. Now, me being the person I am, I couldn't help but to think back at her mama, because how bad you think her mama felt knowing that the night that you locked your daughter out was the night she wound up getting kidnapped and raped and killed. Tortured for weeks and then killed. I know that tore her mama up. I know it tore her up. Okay, so now we got to fast forward. 9 months after Leslie's murder, April 16th, 1992 to be exact, Christian French was abducted in broad daylight in a church parking lot. And she was also held captive as their sex slave and then murdered as well. It later came out, and Karla admitted this, that she didn't necessarily say she demanded, but she said she suggested that Christian had to die because it was Easter Sunday weekend and they had to go over their parents' house. They had to go over Karla's parents' house for Easter Sunday dinner because what it's going to look like, this girl missing and they ain't got no alibi. What? What about your alibi the whole time this girl been chained up in your basement? So, of course, on April 30th, 1992, that is when they found Christian on the side of the road 2 weeks later after she was abducted. That tore the whole community up right there. So now you got a series of 8 to 12 sexual assaults. And now you have 2 young girls who were kidnapped, tortured, raped, and killed and dumped. And you got the wife of the person who did it right there telling you everything. Now, the part that killed me, Karla wound up getting a plea deal by cooperating with the police. And the reason why she got the plea deal as good as she did was because they didn't find the tapes. Why didn't they find the tapes after the police searched Karla and Paul's house for 71 days? Because after the 71 days and their search warrant was up, Paul told his lawyer, hey, the tapes are up in this room in the light fixture. Go up there, get them, look at them. We got our defense type shit, right? Because he already knew Karla was trying to play the innocent, battered wife. Oh, I got battered wife syndrome. I was forced to do all of this. I had no part in it. I didn't even want him to do this. I was in fear for my life type shit, right? Whole time that's a lie. And Paul like, no, we got to get her. If I'm going down, she going down too. What you mean? But Paul's lawyer gets the tapes, sits on them for 15 months, never gives them over to the police. So what happens in that time? Karla makes a deal. What deal does Karla get, you ask? Oh, nothing. A measly 12 years. 5 years for Leslie. 5 years for Kristen. And how many years for her own sister, you ask? Oh, only 2. Because Karla spun her web of lies so well and so fast around the police, and they had no other evidence and no other choice but to go with her, which I feel like was absolute total bullshit. Like, I said it. Because at the very least, once Paul's lawyer got fired and the tapes finally became public knowledge to the prosecutor and the attorney general and the police and everything, y'all should have took her plea deal right then. But they later said that they couldn't undo her plea deal because that would have messed up plea deal bargains later on down the line for other people. Like they was reneging on it. I don't care if you renege on this deal. She deserves to be under the jail with Paul. All right, so boom, let's go back to February 1993. Remember when Karla went to the police because Paul was whooping her ass? The whole time recording all of this stuff. Karla would be like, oh, he'll make me kneel in the middle of the floor and kick me and do all of this. And you stayed with her? And she was like, they was like, how do you know he the Scarborough rapist? She was like, because he told me on the night of my honeymoon when we got married that he had raped these girls. So you mean to tell me you already had murdered your sister with him, willingly murdered your sister with him, and you happen to think that was his first victim and that he wasn't going to try to do this again, or that he didn't have a thing for raping women and you've been riding around with him and all type of stuff? Like, come on, why are you? Okay, so boom, fast forward, they go to trial, right? Only person that's on trial is Paul Bernardo because Karla already copped her plea deal. And part of her plea deal is that she got to testify against Paul. Paul lawyer, well, his second lawyer was supposedly supposed to be like the best criminal defense attorney. He only defends like murderers and all type of stuff, right? So there was a lot of discrepancies going on during this trial. And one of the big major battles they had was whether to show the jurors the tapes of all of these sexual assaults and attacks, and even the tape of Tammy, who got murdered on Christmas. So long story short, they finally came up to the decision that the jurors could see the tape and they could hear the tape, and the public could hear the audio of the tape, but the public could not see it. Right? Y'all following me? Yes. Rewind that part if you missed it. So like the law clerk for Paul Bernardo's defense was like, hey, get Leslie McCaffrey mama out of here, because I done seen these tapes and Leslie out there begging for her life. Her mama don't need to hear that. Her mama didn't listen. Wound up sitting in the courtroom listening to all the tapes and stuff. Wound up breaking down, had to be carried out of there. But the most damning thing was that all the tapes showed Karla was a willing participant every single time in all of these attacks. Not only that, they even found a tape in there that Karla conveniently forgot to mention. What was on that tape, you ask? Oh, nothing. Just Karla luring in an underage girl to get her drunk so that they could both sexually assault her while she was inebriated, and it happened more than one time. They called the girl Jane Doe. Not only that, the tape showed that she was a willing participant in Tammy's murder, a willing participant in Leslie's abduction and assault, a willing participant in Kristen French's abduction and assault. It was crazy. It was mind-blowing, mind-boggling. And I think one of the sickest things they showed us on that tape was how Karla dressed up in Tammy's clothes and would talk and pretend to be Tammy for Paul. Like some sick fetish cosplay type stuff. Like, how psychopathic are you? Like, this is deranged. Like, there's a lot of sick people out in the world, but this sick wench got to be one of, like, you on the hell's top wanted list at this point, because there ain't no way. So, of course, Paul was found guilty on 9 counts, right? Here go his counts right here. Let me read this. He had 2 counts of first-degree murder for Leslie and Kristen, 2 counts of unlawful confinement, 2 counts of kidnapping, 2 counts of aggravated sexual assault, and 1 count of causing indignity to a human body. Later on, he was also charged with manslaughter of 15-year-old Tammy and a string of sexual assaults in Scarborough dating back to 1986. Yeah, they got him. The part that everybody was so pissed off about was the fact that Tammy only got 12 years and she's eligible for parole in 4 years, right? So she got 5 years for Leslie, 5 years for Kristen, and only 2 years for her sister Tammy. Karla's whole defense was that she was a battered woman and that Paul had made her do all of this and that he was in control. But at the end of the trial, everybody felt like she should have had the same sentence as Paul, because once they seen the tapes and everything, they was like, this bitch lying. It's so crazy because in May 1996, they tried to overturn Paula's appeal, but they couldn't do it. They tried to overturn Paula's sentence or whatever. They tried to appeal it, but they couldn't do it because, like I told y'all earlier, they didn't want to mess up future plea deals for other people. I say screw that. Put her under the jail. So, just so y'all know, Karla wound up serving the whole 12. She never got out for parole. I guess there was a little bit of justice in the fact that she had to serve the whole 12, but still. So, while this was going on, Karla, Jane Doe victim, came forward and was like, yo, the prosecutors never hit me up and said if I wanted to press charges. Everybody pretty much left me out in the cold. Like, where's my justice at? Poor Jane Doe never got no justice. They was just like, yeah, what's done is done. You missed your time. Oh, well, hasta la vista, baby. Like, what? So, yeah, after Lord Jesus. After Karla got released from jail in July 4th, 2005, She later moved on to Quebec around this like real French populated area, learned French, started a whole new life. She actually got married to her defense lawyer's brother, had 3 children by him, changed her name, all of that. But then they wound up finding her and started harassing her, which they should have, because you cannot, there is no peace. I don't want peace, I want problems. No, you're not going to live peacefully around me knowing that you done killed all these people and been complicit to all of these people dying and suffering and all of that. Like, no. But one thing I do like, just to end this video on a good note, is the fact that the tapes of all of those girls being sexually assaulted and all of that, they have been burned, destroyed. All the copies have been burned, destroyed, all of that. So people felt like they won't be continuing to be re-victimized every time it's played. So what are y'all thoughts? Do y'all feel like Karla should have got more time? Do y'all feel like, you know, justice was served with just Paul getting it? Do y'all feel like Karla actually participated in the murders or not? Like, what are y'all thoughts on everything? Have y'all seen the documentary? Are y'all gonna watch it now, or did I break it down good enough for you? What's up? Let me know. Because all I got to say is, say it ain't so, KO. Ooh, this was a deep one, y'all.